by the recently deceased Argyro Taki. Rugged roads, bad hotels, small museums with inadequate storage space, visits to remote villages in order to establish the existence, or more often the disappearance, of inscriptions in a church or a field half submerged into a lake. This was, in a sense, an epigraphic Wild West for pioneers who indefatigably worked to provide for the new generations a first harvest of concrete epigraphic knowledge. The next area to be studied was the third Macedonian district, the cradle of Macedonian power, to quote Alfred de la Coulanges, the first real archaeologist who gathered the inscriptions from the area back in the mid-19th century. This part was finally concluded only in 2015, with the volumes containing the inscriptions of Beroia, 1998, the ones from the Sanctuary of the Mother of the Gods at Lefkopetra in 2000, and the 2 volumes of inscriptions from the rest of Lower Macedonia in 2015. The delay was not due to the much bigger volume of the material, 1,341 inscriptions in total, but mostly to external factors. One such all too common factor was the usual evolution of researchers' careers. People come and go, and sometimes change their scholarly focus to work on different projects. This is a good thing. Another, unfortunately, equally common factor was institutional and individual competition. For reasons which need not concern us here, the region of Pieria, an integral part of Lower Macedonia, was set outside the scope of our program, and a corpus of inscriptions from the area remains to this day a desideratum in publications from Macedonia. In other cases, colleagues wished to publish themselves particular individual inscriptions and delayed to do so for a considerable time, thus also delaying the inclusion of this material to the corpora under preparation and hindering access to those monuments. It is what I call the fetish of editio princeps, which may lead to very important documents being published only several decades after their discovery. Finally, a third factor was another perennial problem everyone in this room is familiar with: a limited budget. It is often with surprise that colleagues in more affluent countries or institutions are informed that for most of our institutes past, there has been no discretionary budget whatsoever. From the mid-90s onwards, I can safely say from experience that fieldwork has only been funded by externally funded programs of various kinds, most often requiring us to work on a number of different and sometimes time-consuming and not always desirable deliverables in order to be able to pursue our basic epigraphic research. After the signing of the latest memorandum with the ministry in 2019, we have left the third district behind us and continue our epigraphic journey east of the Axios River with inscriptions of the second Macedonian district, from the Axios to just before the Strimon Valley, excluding, of course, the inscriptions from Thessaloniki and its territory, which have been the subject of 3 volumes of the Inscriptiones Graecae series from 1972 to 2021. The first volume in the new series, covering the areas of Christonia, Mygdonia, and Anthemus, was published in 2023 under my direction, and the second volume with inscriptions from Krousis and Chalkidiki is already under preparation. The project has been funded by the Agni and Mikhail Sakellariou Foundation, and this allows me, now the only researcher in the Institute working on inscriptions from Macedonia, to hire a collaborator and to fund field missions and photography. I am particularly grateful that such funding is available, but I cannot refrain from remarking that the days when 5 researchers could go on a month on a field mission, such as the one in 1981 I described above, are long gone, probably irrevocably so. The other thing that everyone in our field soon realizes is that an epigraphic corpus is outdated already by the time it is published. New inscriptions and new readings of published inscriptions are published every year, and the volume of relevant literature rises exponentially. In fact, the very existence of a corpus facilitates fresh insight into the known material and offers the impetus for new studies. In a sense, the very success of a corpus becomes the cause of its own outdatedness. Moreover, the fact that our corpora are published in modern Greek inevitably poses a problem of accessibility for an international audience. Many of you know the heated relevant discussions on the use of Latin as the language of the Inscriptione Graecae. Finally, it has long been realized that advanced knowledge of ancient Greek among students and even some scholars of ancient history is in decline. In order, therefore, to better serve the needs of an international scholarly audience without knowledge of modern Greek, a student audience without a deep knowledge of ancient Greek, and a community that needs to have all new evidence about a particular inscription conveniently gathered in one place, we published online supplements to the two oldest corpora of the Institute, the one on Upper Macedonia and the one on Beroia. These online supplements in English provide for each entry of the old corpus new bibliography, a new apparatus criticus when necessary, new commentary and a translation, and also a full edition of all new inscriptions published after the publication of the original corpus. The other thing we have been trying to do over the past few years is to organize our material in order to better prepare future epigraphic work. The Archive of Inscriptions contains bibliographic notices and snippets for roughly 6,000 inscriptions, roughly 10,000 photographs and 3,000 squeezes, and a large number of disparate archival material, including old facsimiles, administrative documents of various kinds, and so on. This archive, of course, has been constituted in the analog age, and despite the best efforts of those involved in it in the past, is not without its problems, to put it mildly. We commissioned, therefore, a platform designed as an internal work environment. I mean, not as a publication platform, which is why, as you see, for the time being, it's only in Greek, where we can gradually digitize, store, interconnect, safeguard for the future, and better organize all this material. All documentary and bibliographic material pertaining to an inscription and its metadata, digital, digitized photographs, squeeze number, facsimiles, archive, file material of all sorts, and so on, are uploaded and organized primarily by inscription, while various pieces of information are documented in text form in a structured way, which allows multiple queries. Moreover, there are fields where we can draft a full epigraphic lemma from the text of the inscription to the bibliography and the indexing of the text. This allows us simultaneously to have quick access to a growing volume of evidence and digital or digitized material, and to record a structured draft of the epigraphic lemma on the same platform, or, if you will, to go from the early stages of the preparation of a corpus to the pre-final text document of this corpus within the same digital environment. All this may seem fairly simple and basic, but I assure you that it is robust, helpful, and functional. It is a tool that greatly facilitates our basic work. Finally, very recently, which is why I cannot show you pictures and I show you the Kratos website instead, we have undertaken a small pilot project for the digitization and online publication of our squeeze collection, using hardware and processes similar to the ones used for the Princeton Squeeze Collection project, which you see on your screens. For the first phase of the project, 200 select squeezes from our collection will be made available online sometime in the coming few months, and we hope to gradually be able to digitize and make available our entire collection. So, what is the morale of this brief outline of our epigraphic endeavors? I would like to emphasize 2 points in particular. The first is the vital importance of organized documentary archives. I am not only talking about the direct documentation of an inscribed document, that is, photographic archives and squeeze collections, or about obvious sources of information, such as archaeological reports and museum inventories, but also of any kind of relevant archives, from epigraphic notebooks of earlier scholars and annotated manuscripts to various administrative documents. There are hundreds of examples I could mention, from administrative correspondence or local newspaper articles, which may be the only source for the exact provenance of an inscription, or even for an inscription now irrevocably lost, such as the ones in your example on your screens, or facsimiles of inscriptions now lost, although they were discovered as late as the 1990s, as the second example you see on your screen. To a random photograph from the courtyard of a museum, which showed on the background that an inscription I and everyone else thought was lost was in fact there, badly damaged and without inventory number. Again, I know I'm preaching to the converted in this particular audience, but I think it is an important point to stress both to colleagues who do not realize the amount of tedious archival work required for us to properly prepare a corpus, and to funding agencies who may think that the digitization and publication of such archival and documentary material is unnecessary or a trivial pastime. The second point I would like to stress is that epigraphic work is not or should not be a one-man or woman show. The archival infrastructure of our epigraphic program has been the outcome of the long, ungratifying work of a number of researchers and research assistants over the years. Moreover, what I call institutional memory, the fact that I can benefit from the experience and the experiences of older colleagues, the pioneers I mentioned earlier, who have worked in conditions, in landscapes, and with people I am unfamiliar with, has proven invaluable for my work, for my understanding of the area and its epigraphic output. Some sort of institutional stability and focus on the long term is therefore vital. Few institutions have the possibility, the expertise, the manpower, and the experience of preparing corpora over a long period of time. And no matter how diligent and competent an epigraphist is, the preparation of a corpus is, in my view, by definition, teamwork based on teamwork. This team does not need to be large. We need to take into account the current state of the humanities and not cultivate unrealistic expectations. But even an extra pair of eyes can do all the difference between a never-ending project of an aspiring epigraphist and a proper corpus finished within a well-defined period of time, as should be the rule and not, unfortunately, the exception. The case of the great historian and even greater epigraphist Charles Edson should serve as a cautionary tale to all of us. Edson hoped, much to the Berlin Academy's very justified disbelief, to conclude a corpus of all Greek inscriptions from Macedonia within 4 years, and was finally able, as you know, to complete only one volume with inscriptions of only one city 36 years later. The need for teamwork finally brings me to a topic more relevant to your project, namely digital epigraphy. I may give the impression that I'm a Luddite, indifferent or hostile to digital epigraphy, but that impression is misleading. I was, in fact, an early convert to Epidoc in the early 2000s. The whole concept of text encoding and reusable texts seemed to me the royal road for epigraphic production in the future. The problem, and the reason I had to give up on my digital aspirations, was time and specialization. I distinctly remember my discussions with Gabriel Baudard, one of the architects of Epidoc. He was trying to convince me that writing code, which was back then the only way to produce a proper Epidoc XML file of an inscription, was fairly simple and a necessary skill anyway. And well, I thought it was way beyond my acquired skill set, and I had little time to learn a new one, given the amount of basic epigraphic work ahead of me. I felt that our common goal, publishing epigraphic material, offering new pieces of epigraphic evidence to the scholarly community and the wider public, was better served if I dedicated my time to what I knew better, and I had no choice but to give up, not trying to justify what may have been a wrong decision, but merely to explain it. Interestingly, I was not the only one at Kera with that problem. Miltiades Hatzopoulos himself had entertained the idea of digitally recording epigraphic texts back in the 80s of the last century, long before the World Wide Web. He had secured the use of an IBM computer, a rarity at the time, and had experimented along with Anne-Marie Guimier-Sorbet on software which would help record not only the text of an inscription itself, but also a long list of attributes pertaining to its particular inscribed monument, not dissimilar from the XML code of an epidoc file. He too got discouraged by the time he had to solve very basic problems and had to abandon the endeavor. There are two lessons to be learned from such failed experiments. The first is that you cannot teach an old dog new tricks. The digital humanities specialists need to take into account the need for easy-to-learn, intuitive tools that any epigraphist, regardless of his or her background, may feel comfortable using. The second, and much more important, is that the need for cooperation between teams with different skill sets. If I cannot find the time to learn how to properly encode a set of inscriptions for online publication, then I should collaborate with someone with that background. I know I will certainly learn a lot from the digital humanities expert because I distinctly remember from the vibrant initial discussions within the epidoc community how the scientific rigor required by encoding rules helps one better to understand the conventions of one's discipline. A digital epigraphist without much experience on, so to speak, hands-on epigraphy, on the other hand, may also benefit from the collaboration with a more experienced scholar because the latter's intimate knowledge of the material helps nuance encoding rules and enrich and clarify categories and descriptive ontologies. At the end of the day, there is no such thing as traditional epigraphy and digital epigraphy, only epigraphy plain and simple. We all abide by the same scholarly rules. We all aspire to better understand and more accurately and fully communicate the importance of epigraphic texts. And I would add, we all need to better allocate our limited time and our more and more limited resources as best we can if we are to serve our discipline to the fullest of our abilities. Allow me to end with an image, not with an image of the future, but with a recollection of the birth of modern epigraphy. The scientific project at the core of the Corpus Inscriptionum Graecarum, the first and last corpus of all Greek inscriptions known at the time, was holistic and overly ambitious. The discipline within which the newly founded subdiscipline of epigraphy was born was philology, as the term was understood at the time. That is, as a cognitio totius antiquitatis, the complete understanding of the ancient world, or, to use August Beck's formulation, das Erkennen des von menschlichen Geist Produzierten, das heißt Erkannten, roughly translated as the effort to recognize what the human mind has produced, that is, what has been cognized. This would be achieved by studying public life, private life, religion and art, philosophy and literature, and language. In other words, this philologie, and therefore its youngest child, the epigraphie, had to take literally everything into account in true Renaissance spirit. That, as Burke immediately found out, takes time, human and material resources, and concerted effort, which far exceeds what one person may realistically offer. Only months after he had begun working on the corpus, Beck complained in a letter, "This work weighs very heavily on me." If we do not wish to keep complaining for the task ahead of us, like Beck and so many epigraphists after him, we'd better learn how to work better together. Thank you.
Thank you, Pascalis. I now invite Julien Logero to give his lecture as a skilled one on running epigraphic database.
Where's the paper from?
Зумате там.
Зумате
На той. На той лаптоп е зум. Така къде? Ама не го гледам аз чета. Затова.
So where the cable is there?
I don't know.
Am I supposed to use that?
Where is your...
I'm just not sure if it's going to work.
I don't know. What is your presentation? Oh, you will over
Well,
here?
no, we try. I think there's a. You're not going to be able to put this in Zoom.
Sorry?
You're not going to be able to put this in Zoom.
No.
This moment.
I've taken this from this cable, so must I must shift to. I think I have to use
It's
this.
better for you to shift it because if,
Okay, okay,
if
okay.
you
No,
use
no
this cable, I won't
Do
be
you
able
have a
to.
cable?
Yeah, okay, okay. I'm sorry.
You have a USB drive.
Yeah, hopefully I would have everything. I may just need some. I just need to. Do you have internet here?
Yes.
Anything we don't want. I'm just gonna have to open some of these. So just bear with us for 30 seconds because I just need to get. Okay.
Yeah,
And then can I have I need to go to the
okay. Where?
I need to go to the I have to be able to shift between the PowerPoint and the internet, yes?
Ще може така?
Кирилл, само Zoom.
Okay. Open this one? Sorry.
I need to open all these links.
Okay. Then.
And I need four tabs.
Oh,
So go back perhaps to the yes.
okay.
And then let's try the other one.
Сега да се
Да.
да си
Па така после полето.
Is it gonna open again? Very good.
Yes. Third one.
Sorry. Yes. Okay, we're back here.
Yes. And now you can go to the room like this and share.
и можеш да селектираш кој дел прво.
You have
Okay,
what do
okay.
you choose now?
The
The
yes.
this one.
So we're gonna have to change going from
Yes, you will switch it during the presentation.
okay. Thank you for your patience. So I have become a Mac person and I'm useless with this dinosaur thing that's called a Windows operating system, is it? But I'd like to thank the organizers for their kind invitation and for this wonderfully organized conference. It's always a pleasure to come back to Macedonia, and you're very hospitable people by nature, and you have Macedonia is graced with wonderful nature and archaeology, so and epigraphy, of course. And so it's my pleasure to be here. Now, if Pascalidis fails a bit of the outsider amongst the digital epigraphists, I must confess, I feel also like a cat among pigeons, so to speak, or the outsider too, because I do not come from the field of archaeology or the field of epigraphy per se. So I don't want you to have that impression, but I come from the field of early Christian studies. And I migrated into the digital epigraphy. I find myself sucked into that world. So I've learned as I went, and part of the aim of this presentation when Savisa invited me to share our experience with this digital database of early Christian inscriptions, which we call Inscriptiones Christianae Graecae. So I would like to give you an overview of that project today, present the database, but also reflect about the process of getting into digital epigraphy and share with you some of the lessons we've learned, some of the challenges we've had. I don't want to sugarcoat things and present things as they are, because they are not perfect, but we work through the challenges and we try to cooperate and collaborate with within our team and with other people. So this project was initiated by Professor Padlov, who is here with us today, and Professor Breitenbach in 2007 within the Excellence Cluster Topo in Berlin, which ran from 2007 to 2012. And then it continued within the Excellence Cluster Topo 2 from 2012 to 2019. And all this was thanks to the generous funding from the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, the DFG. It's a very important funding body, and as Pascalis has emphasized, it's very important to secure close partnership with funding bodies and long-term cooperation and support. So this project has involved, as you can see, a large number of contributors over the past 17 years. That includes several editors, so several project leaders, several people on the advisory board, and several what we call epigraphic or digitally epigraphic editors, as well as also a large team of technical staff and number of student assistants who cannot be named here. Now, the initial aim of this project was to collect all the Christian inscriptions from Asia Minor and later on from Greece, with the objective to revise, update, and expand the study on the rise of early Christianity completed by the famous German church historians Adolf von Hartnack in the early 20th century. Maybe you're familiar with this work. It's called the Mission und Ausbreitung des Christentums in den ersten 3 Jahrhunderten. And that went through 4 editions between 1902 and 1924. So in line with this conference, it's a kind of storytelling. And I will show you in a moment the publications that came out of that project. It's really focused on telling stories about inscriptions, but inserting these inscriptions, individuals, documents within a broader history and trying to write a general regional history of early Christianities in various provinces of the Roman Empire. And is an important point I want to make here too, that initially the aim was not to produce a digital corpus of Christian inscriptions. Notice the difference, but to compile a collection of inscriptions that would assist with the revision and expansion of Harnack's work in a multi-volume series of regional studies of early Christianity. Hence, its subtitle, the Inscriptiones Christianae Graecae, its subtitle, a digital collection of early Christian inscriptions. So we made no claim that we produced a digital corpus. I just want us to be clear on that. And they had some important decisions in the way we structured and designed and developed the project. So very early on, we opted to design a relational database rather than have an epidoc, a website in epidoc, like, for instance, the inscriptions of Aphrodisias, which is perhaps one of the standard in some of digital epigraphy. Now, that was an important decision that would prove to be very strategic and with also long-term consequences as the project evolved and developed over the last almost 20 years. Now, as you can see from the collection of books there on the shelves, from a publication output point of view, it's been a relatively successful project insofar as over the past 17 years, ICG has enabled the publication of no fewer than 6 regional studies of early Christianity. So once the first study was by Ulrich Hüttner on the Lickers Valley in 2013, as you can read, then Breitenbach Zimmermann on the Lycaonian region in Western Asia Minor. Then again, Breitenbach Saavedra on early Christianity in Attica. It's actually entitled Athens, Attica and the surrounding regions. I've shortened the title, but you'll be able to find them. Very recently was Stephen Mitchell's early Christianity volume on the Christians of Phrygia, my own book on early Christianity in Macedonia, and it stopped right there at the border. I didn't go as far as Skopje. And again, I must thank all the Macedonians who helped with that project, including Savisa, who's facilitated all my research during the many research trips that I've made in Macedonia. And then very recently, now I believe it's just been released, or it's in press or about to be released, but Huitner's second volume on the Lower Meander. Now, we had also a couple of edited volumes that they're more of a collection of essays essays that were given at conferences in 2017, I think, and 18, which you participated and other people here. There are also a few more volumes in preparations. So be on the lookout for volumes on Galatia, Ionia, and Ephesus, the island of Crete, and I think also all the Aegean islands, the Peloponnese, Epirus, and all the western regions of Greece. So we've gone a long way, we've done a lot of work, but there's still more work to do. So if you're interested in the topic, we'd like to hear from you. If you're interested in collaborating in this project and helping us to move forward towards our goal, that would be great. So this is just to give you a broad overview of the project, and then we'll look more now into more details into the inner workings of the project. So it actually all started with Inscriptione Christiane Asia Minoris, ICAM, which was first designed in 2007, and that went up until 2014. And it contained primarily inscriptions from Asia Minor, which Huitner collected and edited, working on the basis of several corpora. As you know, there's not a single volume that he could have worked from. From a technical aspect, you will notice that ICAM consisted of a very simple relational database. Can I move that window? It's in the way. So this is, I put the structure here of the database, which is, as you can see, it was structured around a core inscriptions entry, and then all these other metadata information, of course, that all interconnected and related to each other. And I will demonstrate that on the newer version of the database later on, you'll understand. So as you can see, we're in 2007, so bear with me. This was actually very basic, not very user-friendly, and it had the interface, the web application presented a lot of limitations. So, for instance, you cannot see here, but if you wanted to, if you wanted to go through the various fields, you had to click on each and every one of these categories, and that replaced the picture that we had here. So you could not have a whole overview of inscriptions. Of course, you had the Greek text, you had translation. It was not bilingual at the time, it was all German. You had more or less detailed commentary, apparatus criticus, and so on. And very importantly, a very, very basic search function here. And that allowed you only to search by entry numbers and not have more elaborate searches by regions or cities, or even search for text and the various dates. So coming in 2014, we actually needed to improve this greatly. Now, this also presented issues in terms of, we didn't have differentiated logins. So we needed to differentiate between people who would do extensive research and needed to have access to the entire material, and people who would just come and casually, potentially have a look at this, maybe students or not as serious researchers, but who could not have access to all the unpublished materials or images that we didn't have permission to publish. So when I joined the project, I should have mentioned this. Well, I was not in the project from the very beginning. I joined the project in 2014. Then I was involved until 2018. Then I went on another project, and I only very recently rejoined. So there are gaps in my experience with the project and gaps in my memory as well. So, but Klaus Halloff is here to fill in the gaps. So when I joined, oh, no, sorry, I need to shift to the website. Sorry. But when I joined the project in mid 2014, very good, thank you. I was asked to expand ICG with material from Macedonia. Yeah, that's good. And to improve the database, sorry. Yes, how do we do? So when I joined in 2014, I was asked to expand ICG with materials from Macedonia and to improve the database interface and the overall usability, with the goal eventually of publishing ICG on the digital repository of the Edison topography. I think you have to stop sharing, perhaps.
Okay, like this.
No, yeah. Stop sharing and then select. Yes, very good. There. This doesn't. Yeah. So after consulting with technical staff, what we understood is that we needed to restructure the entire old database. We couldn't just redevelop from inside and improve it. It had to tear it down completely apart and start from scratch all over again using new MySQL softwares and a new web application. But this provided us with an opportunity to improve the search functions and to conduct more elaborate searches. And also we could introduce geolocation through Pleiades, the DAI gazetteer and the geonames. So I will demonstrate a little bit on what it looks like. This is the second version. So you could go, we were on the previous page, you could go nowadays and use this if you're as a guest, enter here, and you could use a basic guest login, or if you're should I say, more involved researcher and you need special access to all the material, please contact us and we can give you a greater access to some unpublished material. But if you were a guest login, you guess you'd be able to. No, don't tell me it doesn't work. This is, of course, always what happens. Yeah, it works. So this is basically what the database looked like at the time being. So you have basically here on the left, it's organized, and then you understand how this all interconnects itself with inscriptions, the various images, the literature, of course, and various regions and cities or places of where they were found or where they are currently kept. If you click on the inscriptions, you basically arrive to this basic table with the Greek text. We have some Latin text, translations, more or less precise datings, the region, and so on. And on the right-hand side here, you'll be able to see that you have various filters. So you could select different types of inscriptions that you might be interested in. It tells you also in which regions you were found and who has been responsible for digitally editing this database. Now, at the very top, of course, you have the search function. As I mentioned, this is a second version, so we were able to redevelop and improve these search functions. So you'll be able to have filters and search through these various categories, or you could search through here. I'll show you very quickly what, so let's say, for instance, if you were interested in an important city in your region, Stobi, you could go directly to there. I've edited most of these. And you see how it's connected, it's tied to a Pleiades number. So if you were to click on this, you would connect to Pleiades and it would put it on the map for you. So we assume, Stobi everybody knows, but there will be places in the middle of Turkey where you wouldn't be sure where they are. And that's a very useful function. And under these regional categories, you would have all the various inscriptions. So if we find some inscription that's fairly interesting, for instance, the renovation of the inscriptions. So it gives you the Greek text, translation, more or less detailed comments and so on. And further down, you will have whatever images that we've received permission for. So you could search this database, so you could browse and play around this database as you, depending on what your objectives are, what you are looking for. So you could go browse through the inscriptions altogether, or you could, as I showed you, the ancient cities, the various cities where they were found, or the various, that's the modern cities where they were found, or where we think the inscriptions are actually located. And if I go back to one of the inscriptions entry, you see how all of this is interconnected. You can go, for instance, if you click on this, you go, it'll take you to the region of Macedonia where you have all the other inscriptions from Macedonia. If I go back, the same with Shtobi, it would give you all the inscriptions from Shtobi. If I go back, for instance, the image, you're going to get the point. This is how this is all relationally interconnected. You would have, for instance, this is part of my photos archives, and in these photos archives, you see that they have other inscriptions that I have taken pictures of, etc., etc. So this is all. It's not an, as you can see, it's not an EPIDOP website. It's a relational database. But I'll just show you very quickly how the search functions might be, and I'll talk about some of the improvements that we should have thought about that we haven't actually done. So, for instance, in the descriptions, one of the things that we realized as we played and we developed with this is that we didn't necessarily make the difference between the type of documents and the type of inscriptions, and often in these categories they overlap, and that's a little bit unfortunate. For instance, a lot of the invocation that you would have here are actually graffito. So if we were to think about how to improve the database, that's one thing we should have actually done, try to separate these two categories. And you'll see the search function is pretty interesting. So if you can either type in Greek, or you can use for instance, if we use the keyboard that's provided here, if we search for Anastasios, perhaps it will appear. You'd be able to, yes, you'd be able to search, for instance, for certain lexeme in various regions. And here, if you type Macedonian, it should appear. No. Maybe city with it. Oh, of course, it doesn't work. And then you see how it works. You can add various filters. For instance, you could search from the 4th century to the 5th century and so on. And so on. And it gives you, in this case, it gives you no field, but you're able to play with this search function, and has been very helpful for us to be able to filter the various inscriptions as we work on these studies. But the point I want to make is there have been limitations with this too, which will lead on to the next. I will show you we have been working in the last 18 months, which is trying to develop an XML that would tag all of these things. But before we go to that final section, I just want to mention that the goal within Topoi was to actually publish the database in the Edition Topoi, and the digital repository that I mentioned. Can I go to this next? Whoops, no, I'm not able. I'm not able to see the next. Oh yes. No, not this one. Can we move this somewhere? Perhaps can you move? I need to see the next tab. The next tab of the. But this ICG. Oh, very good. Thank you. This ICG database was made public in October 2017, as I've said, through this guest logging, and later on it was published in open access under a Creative Commons license on the digital repository of the Edition Topoi in open access mode with citable DOIs. So we published this in 2016. Unfortunately, since then, Topoi has had issues since it finished in 2019, and the server has been done, and recently we were able to, so there's been some issues. So if you were to go on the repository, you'd notice that we have issues. It will not load properly. But on this page, you also have the feature. These database the repository has been merged into this feature database, which I will show you before what it's supposed to look like. But now it links back to the inscriptions Christiane Greque. So I will show you in a moment. if we return to the if we return to this, yeah, share. This is what the repository was supposed to look like when it functioned properly. And again, I don't want to sugarcoat. I want to show you share with you some of the challenges we've had due to server issues and so on. But this was eventually the inscriptionist, the ICG database was published on the edition Topoi, and we had it all, it looked like this. So you had the list of the various inscriptions, and the inscription entry looked more or less like this. So it's actually, you could have cited with the DOIs here. If you clicked on this, it gave you the DOI, the permanent URI that you have been able to cite. We had hoped that we would publish electronic books with DOI numbers that would link back to the repository, but unfortunately the repository has broken down and we're unable to work with this. So we had also developed a geolocation tool where you could see the regional distribution of the inscriptions throughout Asia Minor and Greece, and some of these projects that were in the pipeline that we were not able to complete. But as I was mentioning, and on a final note, we had hoped to improve on the XML, and this has been in the last phase of the project. So there was some extra funding from the DFK from 2017 to 2019, which allowed us to finance somebody working on the XML tagging and moving towards an epidoc model. That unfortunately, Topoi came to an end in 2019. And again, Professor Breitenbach had to retire from his chair at Humboldt University. So that raised a new set of challenges as to where to house the database, on which server to house the database. Topoi could not host the database anymore. We had to seek help from the library of Humboldt University. They were not able to host the database. And eventually, this database had to be taken to the University of Kiel, where Christian Zimmermann, who's been involved in the project for many years, was able to secure an agreement with the library and host the database there. And thankfully, she has secured funding from the DFK in 2023, and that team started to work on XML and try to implement this version. So this is, I give you, because I know you have digital epigraphy, so I had to show you a bit of code, but this is what they have started to work over the last 18 months. So taking the Greek text, putting it through XML epidoc, and this will allow down the track to be able to tag and produce indices and be able to improve the search function of a database. So here again, the database was supposed to be ready. This project, we had hired an external firm in Berlin that has supposed to be working on this project. Unfortunately, there's been a very lengthy delays. And so the database, I was hoping to have the new database to be able to show it to you this week. Unfortunately, we've been told there's another 2 to 4 weeks delays. But this is just the sort of challenges and issues that you have to do in digital epigraphy. In terms of people not always delivering on time on the projects and delay. But hopefully in the next part of this project, so we'll be able to insert this XML in the database. And as I said, improve the search function, produce indices, tags. If you're familiar with the inscriptionists, the inscription of Aphrodisias, you see how they've been able to tag. You go by select the words or the names and so on, and do more detailed searches within the database. And that we hope that this will be able us, the researchers that are producing the studies, to improve, help them along the way to produce these studies. So I'll conclude on some of the lessons we've learned along the way. And I think this is what I would like you to think about as you're thinking through how you tell these stories, what kind of software or environment you're trying to to develop here and what kind of website you're trying to develop with your project. So first thing is start with the end in mind and be very precise about the goal, the end destinations that you want to reach and what you want to achieve. I find it's a lot easier if you start with that in mind and then you work back step by step and you think about the various stages that you need to go through to achieve your goal, because there's a real danger that you launch out without having a clear goal of your destinations and you just make it up as you go, and you always end up, you explore different options, you go down some rabbit holes, you experience the issues, and if you don't have a real clear goal and visions, I find it's very difficult to come to your destinations. And the problem that we had, I think, with ICG is that it's only as you play with the tool that you start to think about improvements. But the problem is that some of these improvements cannot really be implemented. They should have been thought through from the very early beginning. So start with the end in mind. The second point is try to secure long-term institutional support and funding. And I know This has already talked about this before, that's really the challenge, not only just in digital epigraphy, but also in the humanities in general. But think beyond just money. Think about who's going to host the server, where's the server, who's going to maintain the server, who's going to make sure that the technical updates are put into place. If you have the technical staff that's competent and able to do that and roll this out, because all of these things need resources, not only financial resources, but human resources, competence, skills. And it's a real challenge for all of us. I had to go to another project because halfway through this Topoi project came to an end, and ICG could have actually come to more or less an end and be stuck. And it's always trying to secure more funding from here and there. And so we hope to continue that with the DFK and get further funding and go to the next stages too. A third point would be try to internalize technical development when it's possible. Now, I've mentioned we've had delays with the third version of the database because we've relied on an external advisor who reached the extent of her competence, and she had to subcontract and turn to a firm that's more competent with Epidoc and this sort of dealing with website applications and databases. But that has delayed the whole process over many weeks and months. Whereas the second databases, we did it in-house in Topoi within 4 or 5 months. So I think one of the advices I would give to anybody who wants to delve into this digital epigraphy is try to internalize, have the staff at home and in your house, and you have direct access with them, and you have clear communication lines. It's a lot easier to go back and forth with staff than rely on external, either freelancers or external firms. I find that's actually quite a challenge and can give you setbacks. Fourth point would be work on your own project and organizational skills. In my experience, building epigraphic databases is much more than just epigraphy and databases. It's about managing efficiently limited financial resources, technical resources, human resources, and sometimes having to deal with a lot of administrative works. I think it's in your, it was in your first part of your project. We had to, halfway through the project, we didn't know this, but when Topoi asked us to publish these things online, then we realized, oh, we don't have copyrights for all of these images. So it took me almost 6 to 8 months to handle all of this issue over for 4,000 images. And the more you add material, the more you create issues that we include in the database, mostly published inscriptions, so we don't really have issues with FRAs and so on and archaeological authorities. But images is really problematic, especially places like Greece, which has a very strict policy on electronic media. You cannot publish, or you can publish, you can secure authorization for 5 years, and every 5 years you have to reapply for the same authorization. And you cannot do that when you are limited with these sorts of projects. So it's all sorts of challenges and so on. And finally, try to keep up with technology if you can. I must say the technology and the softwares, part of the problems have they work faster, they evolve much faster than we can collect and edit the material, and publish the studies. So as you can see, and I wanted to be open and honest with you, as you can see, what the database looked like in 2007, it's pretty humbling to see where we were and what we've become. But it very quickly, within a few years, that was totally outdated, and it was a stumbling block. We could not move further. And the same problem with the database. The second two, we developed a new database, but you cannot reintroduce XML. So you have to redesign the whole thing and spend more money and hire more staff. So it's a real challenge. We know short of challenges, but that one's, and I don't know what the artificial intelligence will do to us in the future, but hopefully these are fruitful thoughts for and encouragements for you along the way on the project. So we wish you all the best with the Prometheus project. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. According to the program, we have a coffee break now, and we will continue the session after 20 minutes, I think, or 50. Thank you.
I hope it didn't. 4:30. I didn't go too long. I wasn't too sure.
Yes, ask you.
Who?
Kalina.
Kalina. How do I get these out?
That's very true. Yeah, you are actually. That would be easier. That would be faster. No, that's what we do. So the third project is actually, and that's what we have all the power. It's very expensive. And I was really involved in, let's say, the project, and but they hired somebody only to share. And then she has to turn and subcontracting to another, an intermediate even firm. Whereas I'm saying, if you get a developer, you have to bring it in as a developer, you can work on this for 4 or 5 months. That's how long it took us to develop the second database. I find that if that person is really competent and has all the tools and all the skills, I find that's faster because you might need to go back and forth. Worse, I think it's a nightmare. We need to bring these girls who then go to and then they're going back and forth. You have 2 levels of integration. And it's very expensive. I know it's when you have, but I don't want. I know a lot of freelancers.
Use Indians, use the Pakistan, you know, they're cheaper and
Yes, I know it. Yes. Have you ever
use the French,
right?
they're more expensive.
For sure. And good. We have, I mean, These two together be very it's a thousand years long, so why we don't spend as much money on this. But I agree, I think it could be done a lot faster and cheaper.
Yeah.
But
So my point is, use the Pakistanis. A lot cheaper.
yes,
Like everybody in the world. Yeah.
we have. Well, the Greeks have a rule that you need to request permissions for any digital material, images, inscription, or archaeological object that you put online. And you have to put in the form and ask every 5 years. You may actually have to pay. The problem is, if you're running a website, you're gonna run that for a particular time. And if your project is finite, you just don't, nobody's gonna go back. We have 4,000 images. Imagine we have 2,000 images. Because you will ask every 5 years to the Greek authorities, every 5 years, can you give us? I think they should understand that, they can prove that. And once they give authorization to a project or a digital to a publication, then it's suitable for long term. Once it's long. But no, that's not. I find it better. Lesson learning has been very promoted. Turkey is different because Turkey, if you ask for amusement, you never hear from them. So it's you have to go around sometimes. You have it depends. Really.
Maybe you should be like me. The museum says you can photograph, you just take out your phone and photograph. Museum, what's that anyway?
Yeah, I don't do that.
Добре, це вона секлер, така онлайн сила.
Добре. Ответили, так вийшло.
Це вони не знам далі слушали. Okay, we can continue with the session. I see that our next speakers are ready. I would invite Marta Fognacolo and Alice Benvecini to present their presentation.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Good afternoon. I would like to begin by expressing my deep
Не слушаме.
gratitude. Can you hear me? Can you confirm that you hear me?
Кој како може да им пренесе? Никој нема отворен Zoom, нели? Do you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you? That you hear me?
Yes, we hear you now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I would like to begin by expressing my deep gratitude to Professor.
Can you? That you hear me? Yes, we hear you now.
I'm sorry, but there's something wrong with my audio. I keep hearing my voice like an echo. Marta, is it the same for you?
I can hear you, but like your voice is repeated. I don't know why. Can you hear us?
Hearing my voice. Marta, is it the same for you? Okay, let's try now. Okay, Marta, can you share your screen again?
Okay,
And
I
then
share my
we
screen again and then
try again our presentation. Okay.
Okay.
So I was trying to express my deep gratitude to Professor Ilya for inviting us on this occasion. And I would like to return this kind invitation by inviting all the epigraphists here today to join us in Bologna in 2027 for the 17th International Congress of Greek and Latin Epigraphy, which will take place from August the 30th until September the 4th. I am here today as the principal investigator of a project involving several European universities that promotes digital competencies for the study and valorization of ancient writing cultures. The ENCODE project. ENCODE is the acronym for Bridging the Gap in Ancient Writing Cultures, Enhanced Competencies in the Digital Era. ENCODE is a 3-year project funded by the European Union, an Erasmus Plus strategic partnership program, which brings together 6 academic institutions under the leading of the University of Bologna. Other partners of the project are the universities of Parma, Hamburg, Würzburg, Leuven, and Oslo. We could not be there in person today because an ENCODE Spring School is being held right now in Parma. This project aims to bridge the gap that exists in academic education between the highly specialized humanistic skills provided by curricula in the field of the study of ancient writing cultures from Europe, Asia, and Africa, and the digital competencies required in the academic field and job market, competencies which are still largely absent from our curricula. By digital competencies, I mean not only the ability to use the digital infrastructures and resources available online, but above all, the ability to work actively with digital data, to produce them and to reuse them in creative forms for study and research. Specifically, the project partners have produced a set of tools that will be useful both for university teaching and for institutional stakeholders interested in the preservation and promotion of the written heritage of antiquity, promoting collaborative, participatory, and intercultural digital approaches for conservation and curation, textual and cultural data extraction, analysis, and visualization. Different disciplines and ancient documents were involved, from Greek and Latin epigraphy to papyrology, from ancient Ethiopic manuscripts to linear B tablets, and each university contributed its expertise to the realization of these tools for the study and valorization of ancient inscribed documents. In particular, the project produced 6 outputs. One, a survey to determine the digital competencies required by students and graduates of courses focusing on written cultural heritage. 2 and 3, the design and testing of innovating and customizable teaching modules, basic and advanced, collected in an open access database. 4, a comprehensive guide to teaching modules on these topics with links to useful external resources. 5, an online course published on the Daraya Teach platform, which my colleague Marta Fogagnolo will return to later. And 6, a platform which brings together graduates of courses on ancient writing cultures with professionals and representatives of institutions in the field, such as museums, publishers, libraries, realized through 2 pages on LinkedIn. In addition to these outputs, all of which are open access and freely available on our website, ENCODE organized 7 transnational events, 7 related dissemination events, and 1 final dissemination event over the 3 years of the project, as you can see on the slide. And now I will give the floor to Marta Fogagnolo, who will talk more about the contribution of the Bologna unit to the project, with a focus on epigraphy.
Thanks, Alice. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I guess so. Okay. So I'm taking the floor to tell you something more about the work of the Bologna unit of the ENCODE project, which has been involved in the dissemination of digital technologies specifically related to epigraphy. In fact, the Ancient History section of the Department of History and Cultures of the University of Bologna has a long tradition of projects related to the digitization and valorization of the ancient epigraphic heritage, most of all in ancient Greek, but not only, in a digital environment. The Department of History and Cultures has been a pioneer in Italy in organizing epidoc training activities for the encoding of ancient written documents, having organized 4 international workshops entirely dedicated to this topic long before the beginning of the ENCODE project. From 2011 to 2019, indeed, Bologna hosted 6 epidoc workshops, to which should be added also the London and Bologna Online Epidoc Workshop, in collaboration with the Institute of Classical Studies, University of London, held in April 2021 in the difficulties of the pandemics. While, from 2022, a regular course on the digital encoding of ancient sources in Epidoc has been introduced and included in the curricula of the master's degrees in History and Oriental Studies and in Philology, Literature and Classical Tradition held by Alice. The course is called Digital Laboratory for Classical Sources. Within the ENCODE project, the Bologna organized the first ENCODE event focused on the digital encoding of epigraphic texts and the epidoc markup, called ENCODE Project Conference, and a related digital Greek and Latin epigraphy workshop held in Bologna in January 2021. Furthermore, Bologna has also been involved in international projects aimed at the digital publication of inscriptions. In fact, since 2011, we have been collaborating with Catherine Dobia-Lalou, member of the French Archaeological Mission in Libya, in the realization of the digital corpus IG Sire Givu Sire, inscriptions of Greek Cyrenaica, and Greek verse inscriptions of Cyrenaica. IG Sire contains all the critical editions of inscriptions of Cyrenaica in the Greek period, from the 6th to the 1st century BC, Givu Sire all the Greek metrical inscriptions of Cyrenaica from the 6th century BC to the 6th century AD, encoded in Epidoc XML. The importance of this markup language, which has become the international standard for the digital encoding of ancient texts, is well known, as we have seen today, and I won't dwell on this too long. But I would like only to point out how Epidoc makes it possible to encode not only the traditional components of the critical edition of inscriptions, but also specific interpretative features of linguistic, historical, topographical, and prosopographical nature. This markup also makes it possible to integrate digital images of inscribed objects into the epigraphic edition and to link the edition to other external digital resources, such as maps, geographical gazetteers, prosopographical and bibliographical repertoires, according to the principle of the linked open data, thus enhancing the aforementioned multidimensionality of the object and the scientific collaboration between projects and digital research infrastructures. Those are the reasons why Catherine Daubiat-Lalou chose to publish her edition exclusively online. Here in this slide, you can see an example of an IG Sire epigraphic entry. It contains metadata with physical and historical description of the object, text with diplomatic transcription and critical edition, apparatus translation into 4 different languages, commentary and bibliography. The choice to include an Arabic translation alongside the French, English and Italian ones is particularly important in the view of a reappropriation by the Libyan people of their epigraphic heritage, often stored in European institutions and museums, following the recent trend of decolonizing ancient cultural heritage. Moreover, the edition also includes illustrations, archaeological maps, and photographic reproductions of the stones. The first digital edition, published by the University of Bologna, dates back to 2017, while a new edition corrected and implemented with new unpublished inscriptions was published last year in 2024 and includes a significant number of important technical innovations, such as the adoption of a new XML publication platform, EFES, Epidoc Frontend Services, which allows the automatic and semi-automatic creation of indexes and search facets, thus enhancing the digital edition and aligning it with other Epidoc corpora of the INS-Lib project. But let me say something about this project, Inscriptions of Libya, which is a result of a collaboration between King's College and the Institute of Classical Studies in London, University of Bologna, University of Macerata, and University of Paris 4 Sorbonne, Centre de Recherche sur la Libye Antique. The project aims to create a collection and search portal for the publication of inscribed texts from ancient Libya. It integrates the datasets of several different projects, such as IG Sire GV Sire itself, IR Sire inscriptions of Roman Cyrenaica, IRT inscriptions of Roman Tripolitania, and O Bungem, Ostraca from Bungem, published by papyri.info. But to sum up, the involvement of the Department of History and Cultures of the University of Bologna into the IG Sire GV Sire project consisted in the support for the digitization process, around which a laboratory of Epidoc encoding for students who had participated in the above-mentioned Epidoc workshops was built. This laboratory was the model for the aforementioned digital laboratory for classical sources integrated within the curricula of students of our department held by Alice. But it is also important to remember some collaborations with existing international digital infrastructures related to digital epigraphy. In this regard, I would like to mention 2 projects in which Alice and I are involved. The first one is EDR, Epigraphic Database Roma, a database that collects all the Greek and Latin inscriptions from before the 7th century AD that belong to the Italian peninsula, Sicily and Sardinia. In this project, Alice was responsible for the digitization of the Greek inscriptions of Ravenna, continuing her monographic work published in 2018, which included a new study and edition of the Greek epigraphic heritage of this city. The second project is iSicily, a database in Epidoc designed by Jonathan Pragg, University of Oxford, as part of the Crossreads project, which aims to collect inscriptions and ostraca in all languages, including Greek, Latin, Phoenician, Punic, Oscan, Hebrew, Sicilian, and Elymian, covering a period from the 7th century BC to the 7th century AD, in a multicultural and multilingual perspective, the whole corpus of inscriptions and ostraca of the island, of course. This work involves the re-edition of already published inscriptions and new editions of unpublished new texts, thanks to the collaboration with numerous Sicilian museums and archaeological sites. Within this project, I am in charge of updating the edition of the Greek inscriptions of Catania, of course encoded in Epidoc XML. But I would like to conclude our presentation by showing you perhaps the most relevant product of the ENCODE project, namely, as Alice already told you, the ENCODE online course published on the Daraya Teach platform. In particular, I would like to focus on the unit Greek and Latin digital epigraphy written by Alice, Carla Salvaterra, and myself. The course is designed as a flexible tool with the characteristics of an open course with no enrollment limits, and with the function of a collector of different multimedia contents, text, slides, video interviews with experts in the field, registered by the team, links to external resources such as the teaching modules contained in the already mentioned ENCODE database, as you can see in this slide. The course is aimed primarily at teachers who wish to introduce innovative teaching methods, resources, and digital tools into the traditional teaching of disciplines related to the written heritage of antiquity, or who wish to actively participate in digital infrastructures. But it is also dedicated to students who may wish to explore these topics in autonomy. The unit on digital epigraphy is made up of 10 lessons, which are structured in pages and exercises, where students can self-test their learning. I will now illustrate the structure of the unit more in detail. Lesson 1 discusses the importance of digital competencies as an add-on to traditional epigraphy, thus motivating the essence itself of the course. In Lesson 2, you can find an overview of existing epigraphic corpora and databases, as well as important collaborative tools and initiatives in the field of digital epigraphy, providing links to external resources. Lesson 3 illustrates some new digital projects based on the publishing principles and standards covered in Lesson 4, whereas Lesson 5 illustrates effective pedagogies for teaching digital competencies in epigraphy, also in the light of the experiments carried out during the life of the project. In Lesson 6, you can move from a user to a maker experience by illustrating the structure and functionality of a digital epigraphic edition and of the Epidoc semantic markup for encoding text, metadata, and semantic features. This lesson contains also links to teaching material produced both by the ENCODE members and by the Epidoc community. Lesson 7 considers the topic of data structuring by dealing with the difference between XML and relational databases, and also clarifies the importance of linking the epigraphic edition to external resources according to the LOD principles. Lesson 8 is dedicated to the contextualization of the inscribed object and illustrates new technologies for the reproduction of archaeological contexts and artifacts, such as 3D imaging, modeling, and thick mapping. Lesson 9 offers an overview of tools for scientific dissemination and public engagement, stressing the importance of storytelling and virtual exhibitions for the museum valorization of the inscribed objects. Finally, Lesson 10 shows the new frontiers of AI applied to epigraphy. Artificial intelligence is indeed a very promising and evolving field, with tools designated for deciphering texts, textual restoration of lacunae, identification of original context of the inscribed object, and classification of epigraphic hands and workshops. This is still a pioneering field within the digital technologies for the study of ancient documents. To make the audience aware of these new instruments, the ENCODE team in Bologna has organized 2 dissemination events with experts in the field. The first one is the ENCODE Conference Artificial Intelligence and Inscriptions, Opportunities and Practicalities of Machine Learning for Epigraphy, held in Bologna in February 2022, dedicated specifically to the applications of AI and the study of inscriptions. The second one is a larger event, the ENCODE Conference Artificial Intelligence and Ancient Writing Cultures, and the related ENCODE workshop AI and Ancient Writing Cultures, held in Bologna in January 2023, one of the last events of the ENCODE project. To conclude, ENCODE ended in 2023, and its products have been published and are openly accessible to anyone interested. I invite you to keep up to date with our initiatives by subscribing to the ENCODE community on LinkedIn, because as Alice already told you, this year a new project has been launched that represents a sort of continuation of ENCODE, an Erasmus Plus blended intensive program called Intensive ENCODE, Digital Competencies in Ancient Writing Cultures. This project extends the previous partnership. Among the new partners is also the Sofia University St. Clement Oritsky, in the person of Dimitar Iliev, whom we warmly thank again for the invitation today. This time the project is specifically devoted to the teaching of new technologies applied to the field of ancient writing cultures. And Alice remembered that just this week a workshop in presence is being held in Parma with lectures by experts and practical exercises for students from our partner universities, which is why we are not in Skopje with you. This In Presence week was preceded by 6 online meetings, 2 of which were organized by the Bologna team in collaboration with the University of Cologne and other members of the EpiDoc community. And these 2 sessions were again dedicated to the EpiDoc markup. And also this week, specifically tomorrow, we will have a session about encoding Mycenaean tablets in EpiDoc. It is precisely through the creation of this network, which brings together different scholars and experts in a dialogue and exchange of ideas and projects, that we hope to be able to continue this work of education and dissemination, in the belief that the digital environment could offer new research insights for the preservation, study, and valorization of ancient epigraphic heritage, to which the Prometheus project is making an invaluable contribution. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Alice and Marta. According to the program, we will now watch a film. Professor Halov will show us something. I don't know what this film is about.
In addition to the corpus, I am twice.
They should hear you. Via Zoom.
No? Yeah. In addition to the corpus of Greek inscriptions, or the corpus of Latin inscriptions, a corpus, for example, of Etruscan inscription, and so on. They want to cover all. A turning point came. Yeah. It came later in 1902 when Wilamowitz, together with his father-in-law, Mommsen, wanted to realize the idea of an academy cartel, a cartel of all European academies, several academies that would be jointly responsible for all ancient inscriptions. So the Austrian Academy for the inscription of Asia Minor, the French for Syria, and so on. But next, please.
So, but the plan was bad because was a bad one because the academies had no common label, no common editorial principles, no comprehensive plan. And above all, it couldn't work because the influence of politics and nationalism was not taken into account. And above all, also, for many regions at this time, 1902, nothing at all had been decided at this time. So, for example, for Egypt, there's no idea who published the inscription of Egypt. And the rest of cooperation was destroyed by the First and Second World War. The end of the division of Europe in 1989 opened a unique opportunity for the Berlin Academy to fulfill, once again, its task of editing the Greek inscriptions of Europe in the corpus format. And here you see our plan, starting with volume 1, 2, 3, Attica, then 4, 5, 6, the Peloponnese, 7, 8, 9, the Middle Greece area, 10, the big area of Northern Greece, 11, 12, 13, the islands, 14, the Western Europe inscriptions, Greek inscriptions, and 15, Cyprus. What does a corpus, a printed corpus, offer? At first, a reference number for each inscriptions in the corpus. This is not trivial when you see how citations are made in the internet. So for a DOI number, you need 5 slashes, 27 numbers, 15 letters, and so on. The corpus edition has a clear number, so and you can find the inscription also 100 years later. Then the text based of autopsy. Next, please. So here's one example from thieves in minuscules. That is a reading text. This is important. An addition in majuscules, it is very common among archaeologists, is nothing, but rather shows that the text is not understood. This text, this minuscule text, which is number, is a reference text for further scientific research for more than 50 or 100 years. Then we need a description of Inschriftträger, a date, a commentary, apparatus criticus, and an illustration. Next, please. So here you see the inscription of thieves before and after our work, and you see this squeeze paper on the stones. This is a standard for the edition of an individual inscription. For the whole corpus, there is also completeness within the same framework, set framework. This is usually a geographical unit, a region, a polis, and so on. And a new edition, translations. This is a standard now in the edition of inscriptions. On the one hand, for the user, of course, and on the other hand, also the editor must show us how he understood the text. In the Academy in Berlin, we discussed whether this translation should be added in the printed corpus in future. But since we are a text corpus, and since we cannot evaluate the translations of our international editors as non-native speakers, we decided to put translations online. Because it often happened, that the text was fixed. It was clear since 100 years. And we discussed endless about the translations. This is not our job. So is the translations internet. The fact that the editor translated certain words and phrases differently, it was very crazy. This is not our job as a corpus, as the inscriptions corpus. So it's the internet. And in the internet, next please, as many inscriptions and languages are possible. And I think not every modern language is equally good for translating ancient texts. Since 1902, the Berlin Academy has also the obligation of documenting the inscriptions published in the corpus. That means securing the inscriptions in squeeze and photography, analog and now digital, which, by the way, creates new problems because of the amount of data and of the copyright. So here you see our picture about our autopsy program. You see 2 unpublished tools and now one is published. Of course, the inscription. The other, I think, is unpublished. So the epigraphist, the next one. Okay, the epigraphist cannot be responsible for the physical preservation of the inscriptions. This is your job, and this is a hard job, we know. This is the famous cura lapidum, as Mommsen told us. But there must be one place in every country where an epigraphic archive has been set up, which is maintained and which can still be visited and consulted decades later. Where are the copies of Woolwich, of Mihailov and Gorducci now? Maybe you know it, but who can I ask about a photograph of Mihailov? Where's Pipidi's Nachlass? Who is responsible now for it? And so as I'm writing this, I have come up with an idea. In preparation of the next Congress, of the Epigraphic Congress, the IEGL should ask all colleagues to gain an overview of the epigraphic materials available in academies, universities, and institutions worldwide. I will discuss this later with Denis Rousset. I have written, in the book format, in the book format, the Inscriptiones Graecae follow the plan set out by Wilamowitz in 1902 to collect the inscriptions of Europe, the Greek inscriptions of Europe, in 15 volumes. The volumes IG1 to IG15 each have several fascicles and parts and sections. Some volumes are available in second and in third editions and are therefore to be cited as IG square, IG cubic. This sounds very complicated, but of course, this is a result of a development which goes back 210 years. And this is unique in the field of humanic scientific work, 210 years. When I took over the Inscriptiones Graecae in 1990, there were 4 big gaps. The volume 6, Achaia and Elis, the volume 8, Delphi, the volume 13, Crete, and 15, Cyprus. We were able to fill 2 of these gaps. So IG15, Cyprus, the first volumes were published in 2019, and IG6, Achaia and Elis. The first fascicle with inscriptions from Olympia is ready to print in my computer. Next one. So these are our book format, as you know, and now maybe it may be of interest to know what the next planned volumes of Inscriptiones Graecae are. So on the left side, you find volumes prepared by the members of our IG team. And on the right side, you find the volumes of external collaborators. Now to our website. We have a database that contains, the next please, that contains the text of all IG volumes published after 1945. Since we make the text online on the same day as the printed volume is published, we are more up to date than Packard's database, where the last update is 2023. The next one. We have added translations on the text, as I told you, in German as a standard and in other languages where possible. As you see here, German and then Italian and then Latin. A French colleague told me that it was extremely instructive for his students to switch between the translations. He learned a lot to compare the German, the English, and French translation. And so I'm happy to hear that you also plan to give translations in all 3 languages plus English, of course. And I can say I get a lot of feedbacks on these translations. So not on our text, but always, oh, here's a mistake, or you should better make it this way, and so on. Then, as you see, as an example for Latin inscriptions, I was a little bit, I have to write the name of the man who published the translations from Greek into Latin, because it's a dictum of Diocletian. I wrote Übersetzung, translation, Imperator Diocletian, as you see. Then we include in concordance, the next one, between IG volumes, that is the older and the younger editions, IG2 and IG2 square, and IG2 cubic, and between IG numbers and SEG numbers. So you find always the text, and then IG editions and former or later IG editions. Next. For the older volumes, we have now started to add a snippet of the corpus edition and of the squeeze. Can you say next one? Yes. Yeah. So here's with a snippet. This is simply the text of our IG volumes, because we are not allowed to publish the whole volume by copyright, of course. And next. And here you see, we have the right to publish photos of our squeezes, and we will do this. The problem is that we have 110,000 squeezes, and you have told us 3,000. So it takes a lot of work. We calculated it would cost more than 6 million euros. And so nobody give us this money. So we must work step by step. But the amount of squeezes and the numbers of squeezes are really great. And if you take into account that also the Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum has squeezes, not so much, 20,000. And we have the complete squeezes of the famous Borussian what's the name? Mission from Lepsius from 1843 to 1846. These are 30,000 squeezes, very big squeezes. Then you can imagine this cannot be done in 1 year. It takes much more time and money. When Slavica asked me to deal with in traditional book edition of the corpus at this workshop, and to illustrate the traditional work of an epigraphist, I remembered that a few years ago a film was made in Greece about the work of an epigraphist. It's included the film, a visit to the Epigraphic Museum in Athens and the Epigraphical Center in Berkeley and in the Academy in Berlin. Angelos Mattheou, our colleague, also sent the filmmaker to Berlin for shoot some scenes in the Academy. It is not a film for student education. It's not so, and this is what you want. But I strongly encourage you to take a film in account to illustrate what we are doing and to ask a professional filmmaker to do this. So not with handy photos and so on. The film is 48 minutes long, right? We can start maybe some 10 minutes or 15 minutes to see.
Yes.
And you say stop when the time is over.
Okay, it's my job.
So the last photo, the last photo is next. So this is our squeeze. Again, the next photo shows one installation in the foot of the Acropolis where the film was shown in some events. I do not know really. You see Angelos Mattheou on the left side and me on the right side. And now you see us in the film. So it is no. This is I don't know what's happened with the film. Okay. But even Paschalis has no idea. Sorry.
Αρχίζουμε. Σηκώνουμε την οθόνη. Στο Επιγραφικό Μουσείο βρίσκονται οι περισσότερες επιγραφές στον κόσμο. Πολλές είναι φθαρμένες ή σπασμένες. Σε κάποιες σώζονται λίγα γράμματα, σε άλλες ελάχιστα ίχνη. Ένας επιγραφικός αρχίζει από τα ίχνη αυτά και αν είναι τυχερός θα μπορέσει να ξαναδιαβάσει το χαμένο του κείμενο. Το μουσείο έχει 13.000 επιγραφές. Από αυτές αρχίζουν όλα. Το βέλος εμφανίστηκε. Πηγαίνουμε μέσα στη δεξιά αίθουσα. Προχωρούμε προς το βάθος. Είναι σημαντικό να ακολουθούμε πάντα την εικόνα που βλέπουμε στην οθόνη.
Εξυμπτώσεως το είδε. Έχει ένα πρόβλημα. Ένα πρόβλημα έχει εδώ πέρα, δεν είναι. Έχει φάει μια συλλαβή.
Λέγεται Άγγελος Ματθαίου. Στο μουσείο μου είχαν πει ότι πρέπει οπωσδήποτε να τον συναντήσω. 42 χρόνια μελετά επιγραφές. Ήταν Μάρτιος του 2015. Στρεφόμαστε προς τα πίσω και πάμε προς το βάθος της αίθουσας. Στεκόμαστε εδώ.
Το μουσείο απέκτησε οντότητα το 1886, όταν πλέον ξεκίνησαν οι μεγάλες ανασκαφές στην Ακρόπολη από τον Καβαδία και τον Καβεράου, τον Γερμανό αρχαιολόγο Καβεράου. Οπότε το επιγραφικό υλικό ήταν πάρα πολύ και η ανασκαφή προσέθεται συνεχώς υλικό, οπότε αναγκάστηκαν να το μεταφέρουν στο Εθνικό Αρχαιολογικό Μουσείο, στο χώρο αυτό περίπου που βρισκόμαστε. Τότε λοιπόν προσελήφθη ως επιμελητής αρχαιοτήτων ένας Γερμανός αρχαιολόγος και επιγραφικός, ο Χάμπο Λόλινγκ.
Πέθανε πολύ νέος ο φουκαράς. Ήρθε εδώ λοιπόν γιατί ήθελε να γνωρίσει την Ελλάδα, αλλά τον γνώρισε ο Κουμανούς και εξετίμησε την παιδεία του και το ήθος και τον προσεκάλεσε να έρθει να γίνει βοηθός στην αρχαιολογική εταιρεία. Επαμοιβή. Και τον επόμενο χρόνο, όταν ξεκινούσαν οι ανασκαφές, η μεγάλη ανασκαφή των της Ακροπόλους, το 1885, τον προσέλαβε ο Καβαδίας στην αρχαιολογική υπηρεσία και ανέλαβε και τη συγκρότηση βέβαια του μουσείου του επιγραφικού. Έτσι συγκροτήθηκε το μουσείο. Πρώτος διευθυντής έγινε ο Λόλινγκ, μέχρι το θάνατο.
Προχωρούμε προς το διάδρομο. Στρίβουμε δεξιά.
That's a very beautiful inscription, I think. That is an inscription that is very difficult to read. I've been working on it for many years, but not actively lately.
What was so special about inscriptions?
The manuscript tradition is a long and difficult and complex one, in which there enter all kinds of opportunities for mistakes, such as a monk who doesn't know ancient Greek and who is writing under direction. With an inscription, you are dealing directly. You are touching